Hannah and Lily were inseparable, the kind of best friends who never left each other's side. On a bright spring morning in 2004, they boarded the bus for a school trip, laughing and waving, never knowing it would be the last time anyone saw them alive. The entire town searched for days, then weeks, until hope thinned and their names became whispers in school hallways. But 8 years later, when police returned to the old grounds, what they uncovered wasn't an accident. It was something far darker, buried in silence, and tied to someone no one had ever dared to suspect. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. They were the kind of best friends people pointed at and said, "There's a pair that's inseparable." Hannah, with her sketchbook tucked under her arm, quiet, watchful, always noticing the little things other people missed. Lily, loud enough to fill the hallway, quick to grin, quick to get into trouble. The heartbeat to Hannah's steady breath. Together they were a shorthand. Hannah and Lily, two halves that fit like puzzle pieces. The school bus hissed to a stop outside Maple Ridge Nature Reserve on a Thursday in late spring. The sun was already warm enough to make the dew steam off the grass. Kids tumbled off the bus with backpacks and plastic lunchboxes, teachers counting head nods, clipboards flipping. The trip was supposed to be routine, a guided hike, a nature talk, a picnic. For most of the students, it was a day off, a break from algebra and detention. For Hannah, it was an opportunity to sketch the old stone bridge. For Lily, it was a chance to climb the ridge and see who'd scream first at the drop. They sat together on the short ride in, knees bumping, whispering about silly things. A test score, a boy who tripped in the hallway, the cookie someone promised in the lunchroom. Hannah doodled clouds while Lily pointed at the passing trees, calling out shapes like a carnival barker. The teachers smiled the way teachers do, indulgent, practiced, assuming the group was safe in numbers. At the picnic area, the kids scattered like pebbles, blankets unfurling, sunscreen being distributed. Chaperones told them to buddy up, keep the trail in sight. Hannah and Lily checked off the rules together with a roll of their eyes. Stay with your partner, the rules said. They partnered up, but not in the strict sense. They shared both ways of being, cautious and reckless braided as one. Midday, the group split. Younger kids walked the short loop. The older students were given a half hour to explore the lower glade before the rangers' talk. That was when Hannah and Lily slipped past the cluster of backpacks and disappeared toward the tree line, drawn by something at the edge. Nobody noticed the first 20 minutes. People assumed the pair were circling back to the picnic area with twigs and hearts to plaster on notebooks. Someone later said they'd seen them near the creek, laughing, then walking into the trees where a narrow deer path forked off the main trail. A boy in the group remembered a flash of color, Lily's orange sneakers bobbing between trunks. But the finer details frayed as soon as they were spoken. In the murmur of memory, things drifted like leaves. When the teachers realized Hannah and Lily weren't back for the rangers' talk, the mood folded. At first, there were easy jokes. Teens, huh? Then a frown, then a report to the lead chaperone. The search began like a slow, clumsy dance. Calls across the field, whistles, a shout that broke into the trees and seemed to disappear. A few parents returned to the site frantic, checking the bus manifest, calling the school, pushing through the group of kids clustered like a flock. The principal barked names, his voice held together by a brittle kind of duty. As sunlight moved west, breath became visible in the shade. The creek's murmur felt too loud. The more they called, the emptier the forest felt. Whispers started near the concession trailer. Maybe they ran off, someone muttered, swallowing a sandwich. Kids do dumb things. Another parent, a woman who'd seen teens test limits before, said nothing. She only stared at the trees as if the bark might hand over the truth. Two older men by the bus argued in low voices about supervision. One said, "They should have been watched." The other retorted, "You can't watch every second." The blame thinned into the air and stuck to the backs of shoulders. By dusk, the volunteer search stretched into the darker lanes, headlamps cutting cones of light through the understory. Dogs snuffled and strained, handlers whispering hopeful commands. The lead chaperone's hands trembled when he dialed the police. Helicopters were requested. Frisbees were left behind on blankets. Parents cried into sleeves, arms wrapped tight as if physical pressure could restore order. Phones lit up the road with concerned messages. A crowd gathered at the parking lot like moths to a single, blown bulb. Reporters would arrive by morning, but that night belonged to the small town, to car headlights sweeping over a field that had turned from benign to ominous with each passing hour. Families sat in folding chairs with pictures of Hannah's sketches and Lily's bright grin printed and taped to cardboard signs. They chanted names into the cold like a hymn. The first night bled into a second. The police used thermal cameras. Footprints were checked in soft earth near the deer path. Not a shoelace, not a jacket. No phone signal trailed their path. The only evidence was the empty space where two girls had once been, and the echo of their laughter, now a phantom sound that made searchers blink as if they'd imagined it. By the end of that week, the story burned outward. Social media lit up with pleas, and strangers offered prayers. Yet the hours that swallowed Hannah and Lily had already closed like a book left on a high shelf. Pages there, but unreachable. In the town's diner, over coffee gone cold, whispers hardened into accusations and fear. "How did two kids walk off like that?" a woman asked. A man in the corner, hands wrapped around his cup, only shook his head. "I don't like that field," he said. "Not since I was a kid. No one asked why he'd left it alone all these years. No one wanted to know." That first act closed with the town holding its breath, the rules frayed, and two best friends missing from a day that should have been ordinary. The festival of the small routine world had cracked, and the fissure at its center was named aloud by parents and teachers alike. Hannah and Lily were gone, and nothing added up. The years passed, yet the shadow of Hannah and Lily's disappearance never lifted from the town. People moved on, at least on the surface. New students filled the hallways of the school. New teachers replaced the old, but the whispers never stopped. 8 years later, a chilling phone call jolted the silence. A retired detective, one who had quietly kept the case file by his bedside, reached out to the authorities. His voice cracked as he explained, something had been found. It wasn't in the woods where the girls had last been seen, not near the cabins, but buried deep in the school's old storage basement, sealed behind layers of dust and forgotten boxes. Workers stumbled across an iron trunk. At first, it seemed harmless, rusty, ordinary, heavy with age. But when the trunk was pried open, the air inside escaped like a long-held breath, stale and suffocating. Inside were personal items belonging to the girls. Hannah's favorite scarf, one her mother remembered wrapping around her neck that morning. Lily's broken charm bracelet, the one she swore she'd never take off. But what unsettled everyone wasn't just the belongings. It was the diary, Hannah's diary. Pages torn, ink smudged, but the words still sharp enough to cut. The last entry stopped every officer in their tracks. Written shakily, as if rushed, it read, "Someone followed us. They told us not to scream. If you find this, it means they never let us go." For a moment, silence weighed heavier than the trunk itself. The basement seemed colder, darker, as if the walls themselves carried the secret. Back in town, the news spread like fire. Whispers sharpened into accusations. Parents pulled their children close. Teachers glanced at each other with unspoken dread. And the elders who had always known more than they said quietly avoided questions. Two men in the diner leaned in, their voices low but sharp. "I told you, it wasn't the woods. Those girls never left the school. And you think the teachers didn't know? Please, somebody helped bury it." The camera of memory lingered on Hannah and Lily's smiling faces in their yearbook photos. But now, no one saw innocent smiles anymore. They saw shadows behind them. The cops knew one thing. The girls hadn't just vanished. They had been silenced, and the school itself had kept their secret sealed for nearly a decade. And that diary? It was only the beginning. The discovery of the trunk cracked open the silence, but it also unleashed something no one in town was prepared for. Reporters swarmed the quiet streets. Old classmates resurfaced with memories they had long buried. And families that once smiled politely at each other now avoided eye contact. The school board tried to downplay it. They said the basement was full of forgotten things, that items could have been misplaced. But no one believed that. Not after the diary. Not after the chilling last entry. The detectives went back to the beginning, retracing the steps of that school trip in 2004. The camp cabins. The marked trail through the woods. The last known sighting of Hannah and Lily near the edge of the lake. But here's the thing. The old files were incomplete. Photographs had gone missing. Statements from certain chaperones were vague, contradictory even. And the teachers who had been there? Some had since retired, others moved away, and one had vanished altogether. The town remembered him, Mr. Kearns, a quiet man, history teacher, the kind who always lingered a little too long in the hallways. Students joked he was watching them, but no one really laughed. After the disappearance, he abruptly left. No farewell. No trace. His name surfaced again now, like a ghost pulled back into the light. Late one evening, 2 retired janitors sat on the back steps of the school, smoking quietly. They thought no one was listening when one whispered, "You remember the night after the girls went missing? Don't start that again." I heard it, crying. From the basement. The other man flicked his cigarette into the dark, refusing to answer. But his silence spoke louder than words. Detectives pressed harder. The basement, the locked storage areas, the abandoned staff records, all of it came under scrutiny. And with each day it became clearer. Hannah and Lily hadn't disappeared on the trail. They had been taken and hidden close. Too close. Parents who once trusted the school began demanding answers. Old classmates admitted things they had overheard back then. Teachers arguing late at night, a strange smell from the basement, doors that were suddenly locked when they shouldn't have been. It was no longer just about 2 missing girls. It was about a community forced to admit that it had looked away, that the truth had been sitting in the dark all along, waiting for someone to open the trunk. And now that it was open, no one could close it again. The diary entries replayed in everyone's mind like echoes. Teachers who once held authority now avoided questions, their hands trembling whenever detectives asked about Mr. Kearns. The once respectable history teacher had vanished right after the trip, too much of a coincidence for anyone to ignore. The police traced what little they had of his past: rental records, an old post office box, a receipt for rope and a lantern. Nothing pointed to murder, but nothing felt innocent either. The whispers in town grew heavier, mothers pulling their children closer at night, fathers remembering uneasy conversations they once dismissed. Bystanders spoke quietly behind the cops' backs. If he's guilty, then others knew. Somebody had to protect him. The school buried it. Mark my words. Detectives brought in a locksmith to open sections of the basement that hadn't been touched in years. The locks were rusty, but the hinges groaned alive, as if something inside was resisting. Dust filled the air. The silence of the corridors turned thicker, heavier. And then, tucked behind metal shelves, they found another trunk, smaller, but darker. Inside weren't bones or bodies, but fragments of clothing. A scarf, a shoe with worn laces, and a faded photograph of Hannah and Lily smiling on that trip, their arms around each other. Pinned to the photo was something worse than any bloodstain, a torn note in handwriting that didn't match either girl's. It simply read, "They didn't go far." Panic spread. Parents demanded answers the cops didn't yet have. Neighbors began pointing fingers at one another. Some swore they remembered seeing Mr. Kearns wandering near the woods, muttering to himself. Others claimed he wasn't alone, that another staff member had always covered for him. The case that once seemed like a tragedy of chance was shifting into something sinister. Not just 2 best friends lost in the woods. Not just bad luck. This was orchestration, and the town, for 8 long years, had been living above it, pretending not to hear the whispers in the walls. The trunk with the photograph was the crack that broke everything open. From there, detectives combed the surrounding grounds with a precision they hadn't used in years. The woods were scoured again, but this time, with eyes that weren't searching for children, they were searching for proof. And they found it. Near the edge of the old field, where grass grew too wild to mow and the soil seemed to breathe secrets, their spade struck something harder than earth. The ground gave way to a shallow covering, and beneath it, layers of plastic sheeting and what remained of Hannah and Lily. The discovery didn't bring relief. It brought horror. The girls hadn't wandered. They hadn't been lost. They had been hidden. The medical examiner worked in silence, his gloves shaking as he noted that the girls' injuries didn't match any accident. Rope fibers, marks on wrists, evidence of deliberate harm, all pointing to one conclusion. Someone had kept them alive for a time before finally ending it. And then, the most chilling details surfaced. A notebook, buried not far from the bodies. Its pages carried sketches of the school, the girls' schedules, and chillingly, entries written as if planning a performance. Dates matched the trip. Each line was obsessive, almost ritualistic. And at the top of the final page, one name appeared in bold, jagged handwriting. Mr. Kearns. The town's collective denial shattered. Every conversation, every ignored suspicion from 8 years ago, came rushing back with venom. The bystanders who once whispered now shouted blame. Parents demanded resignations. Teachers sobbed in shame. "So it was him all along," one old man muttered on the street corner. "And we let him walk away," another spat. But the cops revealed one more twist. Evidence suggested Kearns didn't act alone. Notes hinted at a watcher, someone who helped keep the girls subdued. The case that had seemed closed now reopened a deeper wound. Betrayal wasn't just from one man, but from someone still among them. The legacy of Hannah and Lily's disappearance wasn't just tragedy, it was exposure. It forced the town to face its own silence. How people looked the other way. How whispers were ignored. The best friends who vanished weren't forgotten. They became the haunting proof that secrets, no matter how carefully buried, always find their way back to the surface. And the final revelation, the cop's words still echoing, was this. This was never about two girls getting lost. It was about two lives stolen, and a truth everyone was too afraid to face. If Hannah and Lily's story gripped you, remember, silence protects no one. Share their story, subscribe for more untold cases, and never stop asking questions, because the truth has a way of clawing its way back no matter how deep it's buried.